Welcome again, brethren, to another presentation of part 2 of our new code report. We're going to go ahead and discuss this issue today, and we left off right here as we went over the first parts of the report up to page 17 into 18, and now we're going to get to the part in the report that is the contradictory or non-harmonious new codes. Before we do that, we request that our listeners pray to the Lord to ask Him for the Spirit of truth, that He may guide us into all truth. And after you've done that, we can continue the video. Okay, so the next part of the report on page 18 is the contradictory and non-harmonious new codes. This is the part where we went into, with the brethren, we went into each of the codes that didn't harmonize with Brother Hadaf's recorded writings. In other words, when we say Brother Hadaf's, we say that he was the one that edited and published and supervised and looked over this the message that he himself authorized. And this is very different because that is the basis that we compare the Florence Hadaf writings to. In other words, we have that as the standard. And if the codes that Brother Hadaf did not edit, did not authorize, and did not finalize to be put in the golden bowl, does not match up with those that he did, well, then we got a big problem. And these codes that you're about to read are the ones that have the big problem. I believe there was 7 of them, and we want to carefully look at each one of those. So let's start with the first one we noticed was volume 11, number 3. This code was led off with Florence's words. The sermon Brother Hadaf delivered November 11th, 1944, has been selected for this issue of the code because it deals with the importance of the certificate of fellowship. It is particularly timely since it is now in order for the holders of the certificate to have theirs renewed, and explains to new Davidians the significance of being eligible for it. All right, so here she's giving the reason for this particular sermon that she wanted to bring out. According to Florence, this sermon was given on November 11th, 1944. Now let's keep this date in mind. So we were able to point this out, that we want to remember that she says that he gave this November 11th, 1944. Keep in mind, this is all based on her, quote, recall. She has no evidence of it other than that she remembers that it was dated on this date. So this is something very suspect. As we reviewed in this code, nothing of note was found until we came to the end of page 10, which reads, "Many have asked who is eligible to lead in the service of the work. The answer that goes out from Mount Carmel is that anyone not holding a certificate of fellowship cannot be a Davidian teacher. He can listen only. Yet just granting of the certificate of fellowship is a cheap thing. That in itself would have no significance. Who receives the certificate? Those who have personally studied all the message and believe it. Those overcoming temptation, those complying with all the requirements, those who put their treasure where the moth and thieves cannot enter, those who keep all the commandments, those who are not flesh eaters, drunkards, or tobacco users, those who do not rob God of tithes and offerings." Page 11. We see that according to Florence, Brother Hadaf preached that only a Davidian with a certificate of fellowship card could teach the message. Further, he said that they could, quote, listen only if they possessed no card. Now this is where we have to really zoom in here, brethren. Florence is wanting us to believe that Brother Hadaf in 1944, let's review that date again. Let's go back here and see what it was. It was November 11th, 1944. He made a sermon where he said that if you don't have a card, you can listen only. You can't teach the message. You can only be a listener. Okay, so our review of the message shows that this is not in accordance with Brother Hottef's published message, nor even his personal views on the matter. Now, the reason why we put nor even his personal views on the matter is because originally we had planned on putting Brother Hottef's correspondence letter to M.J. Bingham, and it dealt with the certification card. And we went over that with the brethren, whether to put that in the final report. And there was sufficient amount of brethren that thought it wasn't a good thing to do. It was something where they thought that it may cause a difficulty because it was more of a private letter between Bingham and Brother Hottef, and they thought that this might cause more harm than good. But that was different than my view, but I agreed with the brethren, and therefore we did not show that personal letter in this final report. But just so you know, the personal view was that Brother Hottef was telling M.J. Bingham that he was worrying too much about his certification card, and Brother Hottef said the words that they shouldn't matter one way or another whether you have the card or not. It shouldn't affect your Christian experience. And so this was very powerful, I thought, and just wanted to bring that to your attention. To begin with, we'll show the following reference. All right, so here we see in question 153, Brother Hottef tells, is one a member without the certificate of fellowship? May one be a member of the association without holding a certificate of fellowship? In other words, the card. Answer, yes. One may be a member without holding the certificate of fellowship. Now, this is very key. That's why we put it in red. In the report, you'll see it's highlighted in red. Well, the reason why we wanted to put this out there for this obvious reason, that there are some brethren, particularly Bashan brethren, that teach that if you don't follow through and get your fellowship card, you're not right with God. In other words, they're trying to supersede the prophet right here. Now, notice clearly the prophet says you may be a member without certificate of fellowship. Now, he adds to that, yes, but to be a accredited member, privileged to enjoy to the fullest all the benefits which the association affords, he must hold the certificate. So this is beautiful and simple. I mean, if you want to get all the benefits that the association provides, for instance, they provide some help on hardship cases. You know, people get laid off their job, or they have a family emergency. If they've been a tithe member for a certain period of time, the association will come to their rescue maybe and give them something to help them. Yeah, there's different accredited privileges that you can enjoy. But that doesn't necessarily, that fits everyone. For instance, yours truly, I have never been a member of any of the associations, but yet I return my tithes to them. So in effect, I am a member, and we'll read further more references to that. So this is very clear, brethren, and it shouldn't cause confusion. We note that some Davidians today teach that you are not right with God, i.e. Bashan, if you know the message and yet still don't obtain the card. In fact, one of the brothers there from Bashan, I mean, I couldn't believe it, brethren. He put out a video saying that you're not even going to make it to heaven if you're a long-time Davidian and you have failed to make the card. This is ridiculous, brethren. This is what the Bashan teachers are teaching. But here we see that it is not a requirement to have a card to be a Davidian Seventh-day Adventist. All right, now this is the part I was mentioning. What identifies one as Seventh-day Adventist? As a Davidian Seventh-day Adventist? Well, you go into the question 150, and you can read it at your leisure. But basically, the only genuine certification of the fact, and these are the only convincing evidences of one worthiness of membership to Davidian Seventh-day Adventist. Now, what is this? Vegetarianism, dress reform, total abstinence from tobacco, alcohol, beverages, all that's contained in spirit of prophecy are the truest witnesses of affiliation. And also here, one support. In other words, are you a tithe payer? If you're not, don't kid yourself that you're a Davidian. Okay, don't get into that trap that you're a Davidian and yet you've robbed God. You can't even imagine how foolishness this is. When the time comes, those people will be exposed. We don't want to be in that position. We want to be known as a faithful tithe payer. And living out the principles, baptism, Sabbath observant, along with the Ten Commandments, yes. So these are all the truest, as it says, only genuine, visible certification of the fact. Is the card the certification of the fact? No. These are right here. So we wanted to bring that out so we could have clarity on this issue. That's why we have a big problem with this sermon. We note that these answers were published in 1944, the same year the so-called sermon was said, the same year Florence claimed Vieta made those listen-only statements. Let's now discuss the teaching aspect in the Spirit of Prophecy we read. No need to depend on the sanction of any minister or any people to do God's work. God will vindicate you. Of course, that's found in General Conference Bulletin, April 3, 1901, paragraph 34. This plain, obvious, inspired Word of God is too plain to ignore. Obviously, if one has the gift to teach, that would be one's work God would have him to do. So if you're a teacher and you go by Spirit Prophecy, well, what does it say? You don't need no sanction. You don't need no certificate. You don't need no school approval from the teachers, going to a class and all these things. No. God will vindicate you. You've learned from the Spirit of truth, not from man. The rod shows support for this. Now, this is key because here's a statement from Spirit of Prophecy, and what happens? The rod backs it up. Okay, you can find that in Fundamental Beliefs Tract, page 25. And what year? 1944, brethren. Okay, so you're telling me that Brother Houghton quotes this and backs it up, and yet in the same year he puts a sermon out that says, no, this isn't true. You can only listen. You can't be vindicated by God and do God's work. No, you can only. This is ridiculous, brethren. This is why we call this code out. This is something where we truly believe Florence Houghton was up to her shenanigans in this code, volume 11, number 3. All right. Preponderance of evidence is on the very same year that Florence claimed the sermon was made. The rod supports SOP's statement. So we just went over that. All right. This is the last point. Jesus, our King, who is the final answer in all things, confirmed Spirit Prophecy and the rod. Or I should say Spirit Prophecy and the rod confirmed him because he was the original in all things. So we note that a stranger not associated with the followers of Jesus was preaching his message and given authority to do so. John answered and said, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and we forbade him, because he follows not with us. And Jesus said unto him, Forbid him not, for he that is not against us is for us. Luke 9:49, page 50. So here we see that the Master himself, our King, says that don't stop somebody from doing work in my name. If they're with God and teaching the truth as it is in Jesus, don't forbid him. Don't stop. So this is ridiculous, brother. Listen only. Okay. Lastly, on this issue, the rod made clear the certificate of fellowship does have its privileges, and that all who wish to obtain one should do so. What we find non-harmonious is saying a Davidian can listen only if he does not have a card. We cannot believe this statement was made by Brother Houghton based on all the evidence we just showed you, and thus this new code is under suspicion and labeled contradictory. Let us remember as we go forward, Florence Houghton, as we showed in that TG, was bold. She was careless. She was willing to tamper with the rod. So she had no conscience about this. She thought it was something that was okay, whether she thought she was a certain privileged person or maybe even some type of carrying on as a prophet in place of Brother Houghton. We don't know her thinking process, but we know it was disturbed. And so when we realize that, we have to understand that indeed, as we look closely at these new codes, there was some strange stuff going on, and we believe that it was Sister Houghton or somebody with that council that was inserting things into these codes. Okay, lastly, Okay, we want to get over this last point that we don't believe that somebody saying, "Oh, you shouldn't get a card. You should stay away. It's a bunch of technical, baloney and all this things." No, no, no. It's very clear. The rod is supportive of people getting fellowship cards, and so are we. If you feel the need to get one, by all means, get a card. It's a really great privilege to have a card. Like I said before, yours truly has never felt the desire to need a card. Number one, I have been blessed with a very strong and good, solid business income. Therefore, financially, the Lord has been blessing us, and I've studied under the Spirit of truth and looked deeply into the message, so I don't need to be taught anything from the teachers. These DLIs and all these things are great, but yours truly doesn't have that need. So this is why it's all up depends on your position and how you view getting the card. All right, the second one that we found was volume 11, number 7. All right, this code begins with the problematic statement from Florence Otto. The sermon which has been selected for this issue of the Symbolic Code is on Isaiah 27. It was given on several occasions in 1936, and the last time Brother Hotta presented it was February 27, 1943. On September 1, 1936, Brother Hotta made remarks concerning the possibility of trouble coming to the church after the sealing of the saints and before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9, and if so, what results would be and why. Since Revelation 11 has more recently been unfolded before us, we should be able to see that as not just a possibility, but rather both a fact and approaching reality that trouble is coming to the church before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. None therefore be ignorant concerning what we must now be doing about it. Oh, brethren, when we read this statement from the code in the meetings with the brethren, everybody was like, wait, stop. Everybody said, let's hold it here. We are very well familiar with this statement, and it's amazing that we as present truth believers allow volume 11, number 7 to be repeated in the message. And a lot of brethren quote from this, and we can see this is so tainted. This quote, this symbolic code is just very tainted because, as many know, the statement on itself is just outright heresy, outright blasphemy to say that God revealed Revelation 11 to Sister Hotta and the council and told them that April of 1959 was going to be the fulfillment of it. I mean, oh no, this is what is this new code history here. Okay, the underlined portions were indeed troublesome on several points. Let's take them one at a time. Florence claimed remarks were made by the prophet on September 21, 1936 about trouble coming to the church. Can we find any evidence of this? Or is this her personal recall remembrance? Volume 2, number 9, was made September 1936, so that would be a good logical place to check. After reviewing that code, we found nothing specifically expounding upon a pre-Ezekiel 9 trouble to the church. It appears September 26, 1936 remarks are not backed up by anything except Florence's word for it. As we go forward, you will see other indications that these so-called Brother Hotta said quotes or statements are not necessarily backed up by anything other than Florence's promise that he said such statements. This is fine as long as it's harmonized with what Brother Hotta published. If it doesn't, we got a big problem with the Florence Hotta published codes. As already shown, she was not afraid to tamper with inspiration. Number 2, trouble coming to the church after the sealing of the saints and before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. Now this is a big problem with the new codes. This is what's called the intervening time. This is one of the most concerning statements found in these codes. This is one of the code statements that lends to the, quote, intervening theory. To start, many Davidians learn the message basics starting out their Shepherd's Rod studies. And one of those basics are Testimonies to Ministers, page 445. Now, we all know, or should know, this very basic Rod foundational statement. All right. And the Rod quotes that here. The angel of Revelation 7, who prophetically seals 144, is the same as the one of Ezekiel 9. So we see that not only the Spirit of Prophecy says that they're one and the same, Ezekiel 9, and the sealing of 144,000 are one and the same. The Rod backs it up with this quote right here. And you can read that at your leisure, but it says, this sealing of the servants of God is the same that was shown to Ezekiel in vision. And again, he quotes Testimonies, page 444 and 445. All right, we have another quote here. And unassailable sequence of Vic, only bulwarks of Spirit Prophecy's position that this sealing of the servants of God is the same that was shown to Ezekiel in vision. So we see that time and again the Rod and the Testimonies confirm. In fact, there are 34 references in the Rod that show Testimony of Ministers, page 445. They all support the basic doctrine of the sealing of the 144,000 being the same as Ezekiel 9. So let's talk about that just for a second here. This is very key because we're told we have to go by the weight of evidence. And when we do that, we know that these codes, these new codes, here and a few other places, lend credence to the untenable position that there is a space of time for trouble to come to God's people, to the church, after the sealing and before Ezekiel 9. But we see from the Rod message 34 references, plus there's others, that support no time for that to happen. Because Ezekiel 9 and 144,000 sealing happen at the same time. Okay? So this is very troublesome, brethren, this idea of intervening time. And we want to point that out because that's why many of the brethren have trouble with these codes, is because of this terrible teaching. Thus, on this one point, this code fails miserably to be that of the so-called sermon preached by VTH. There is no way Brother Hoddle makes a statement that leads one to think certain events can happen after the sealing and before Ezekiel 9. This can only be Florence Hoddle or someone not knowledgeable enough to know the message on this basic doctrinal point. Additionally, there are many other Rod references one could use to establish the same point. And, all right, let's go to number 3. Since Revelation 11 has more recently been unfolded before us, we should be able to see that it is not just a possibility, but rather both a fact and approaching reality that trouble is coming to the church after the slaughter, before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. This is one of the better known errors in the new codes. We notice Florence calls her and her counsel's 42-month self-made prophecy a fact and approaching reality. We all know that fictitious statement. This evidence is clearly showing that she and her counsel had an agenda to select supposed VTH sermons and bring them to the forefront. This was done to set the flock up for their great prophecy to come, so they thought. Because of that obvious course, it behooves all present truth believers to carefully inspect all these new codes. This report can help serve as a guide, but we encourage everyone to see if these things are so, as the Bereans did. So we want to emphasize that we are breaking this down, but to do your due diligence, you should go over each of these codes that we call out and see for yourself. You may even spot some new things that are troublesome that we left out. It is no wonder some of the old-timers rose up against their private predictions and private program of the new code in New Carmel. They saw clearly the new codes were new Carmel's private program, complete with private ideas and private prophecies. All right, so let's look at other issues in this code. All right, in the new code, it quotes Revelation 7, 1-4. You all know that one. And then we put the highlight. You notice here that the angels are not told to hold the winds until Ezekiel 9 has all been fulfilled, but until the servants of God are sealed. Therefore, if there's intervening time between the close of the sealing and the slaughter of Ezekiel 9, there's a possibility that the winds could start blowing during that time. If the nations have already had everything ready, it would not necessarily take long to bring the trouble that is represented by the four winds. We do know from the scripture that God will restrain the winds until the sealing is finished. For according to verse 3 of that chapter, a message was sent to the four angels instructing them to hold the winds until the sealing of the 440 is finished. It shows that the devil is doing all he can to loosen the winds as soon as possible, perhaps even a day. Oh, brother, we had so much trouble with this. Okay, where do we even start? Okay, so this is where the brethren get. Keep this in mind. Levin Symbolic Code number 7, page 7 and 8. This is infamous according to this new code theology. Very infamous. Why do we say that? Because this is just terrible teaching. Therefore, if there's any intervening time between the close of the sealing and the slaughter of Ezekiel 9, there's a possibility the winds could start blowing. There is no intervening time, brethren. We know from the message, we already quoted Testimonies of Ministers, page 445, and the rod supports that 34 times, that the sealing of Ezekiel 9 and the sealing of 144,000 and the slaughter of Ezekiel 9 are one and the same event. Now, one thing I want to make mention of is that in track 1, page 38, I believe we have this in the code report, if I recall. Track 1, page 38, it's a command statement. And I think we'll go over that. It's up here pretty soon here. It's very powerful. That shoots this whole idea right to the ground. Again, for the second time, this new code promotes the idea of time period existing between the sealing of 144,000 and Ezekiel 9 where trouble can come to the church. As shown already, this intervening time is without weight of evidence and not in harmony with Bible, Spirit Prophecy, or VTH published message. Also on page 8 and 9 of this code, we find the following. We found something else here too. You notice here that the angels are not told to hold the winds until Ezekiel 9 has all been fulfilled, but until the servants of God are sealed. Here it says trouble could come once this before Ezekiel 9. Yet a couple paragraphs later it says, if sinners were still among God's people when the winds start to blow, the church would fall. For while sinners are among God's people, the church cannot stand against her enemies. In other words, were trouble to be brought against the church before the abominations were eliminated, before the unrighteous are taken out of her midst, there is a possibility that the whole church would fall and that God would have to intervene himself to rescue her. So this is so terrible. Write down the next very paragraph of the same code. She's talking about the opposite of what she just talked about before. So it's contradictory in 2 pages. All right, now we get to another part. According to verse 3 of this chapter, a message was sent to the four angels instructing them to hold the winds until the sealing. It shows, okay, this is the highlight. It shows that the devil is doing all he can to loose the winds as soon as possible, perhaps even in a day. Let's keep that in mind, brother. She's claiming that the prophet said the devil is doing all he can to loosen the wind as soon as possible. The goal is the devil wants to loosen these winds up as soon as possible, maybe even in a day. All right, let's see what the prophet's published message says. Let's compare this statement with VTA's published statement. And this is the one we all know. Okay, this is the one that's found 2 Symbolic Code number 1, page 9 and 10. You can read that at your leisure, but we just want to call out one thing. The only thing that would compel him to pass Sunday blue laws and go to make war with the remnant of her seed, those that are left, Revelation 12:7, is the purity of the church, when God, by the slaughter weapons of Ezekiel 9, takes away the tares which receive not the mark. And even then, Satan will not enact blue laws until he has exhausted every other weapon against the church. So we see that, according to the message, is Satan working for God's and his church's interests, or against? If against, he will never do one thing to purify the church or fulfill prophecy. Oh, brother. So Brother Hodder's message says that Satan is not going to do things to fulfill prophecy. And then Florence Hodder's new code says he's doing everything he can to fulfill prophecy. You get it? Just terrible, brethren. This is another example of this terrible contradiction. All right. Volume 11, number 8. This code leaves no doubt, as seen from Florence Hodder's word, that an agenda was set in place for their new code program. All right, this is where she gets down to business. God has revealed the 42-month prophecy to us for no other purpose than that we might realize that we individually have no time to lose and clean ourselves up with the provisions he has given us, no time to lose in getting our divinely appointed work done in the church, and no time to lose in setting our own house in order. Once God's people need information for their own good, the Lord will not withhold it from them. All right, so here's very disturbing, as we highlighted. Florence Hodder and the council has now laid the word on the altar. Hold on 1 second, brother. I'll be right back. Okay, so we see here, God has revealed the 42-month prophecy to us. All right, now listen. This is volume 11, number 8. Why in God's green earth are we still propagating volume 11, number 8 out in the field? No wonder Mother, if she comes across this, is going to have fodder for us, brethren. They're going to have fodder. What are these mixed up people proclaiming here? What are they, mixing truth and error and trying to make us believe it? Ay, boy, I tell you. Florence exposes her and her counsel's deception again. She is convinced that God has revealed the 42-month prophecy to him. Time would expose them as rank impostors, imposing their false agenda prophecy upon the flock of God. All right, so this was the problem with volume 11, number 8, but it has more. Had Jesus meant that he would be in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights, he would not have said heart of the earth. It therefore shows that, contrary to appearances, Jesus was actually resting in the power of God those 3 days and 3 nights, and therefore he was in what? A good and safe place. You see what the new code says here? A good and safe place. Oh boy, we've got big problems here, brother. The idea from this code that Jesus was, quote, in a good and safe place is contrary to the VTH published message. Okay, let's read why. In track 10, page 15, the heart of the earth has been erroneously interpreted to mean the grave, when instead it is, as Jonah's experience shows, symbolical of Christ's imprisonment in the hands of sinners and in the tomb. Jesus used the expression to indicate that he was to be 3 days and 3 nights in the hands of sinners and in the grave. Why are sinners called heart of the earth? Because the man was made of it, according to Genesis 3:19. For dust thou art, and then dust thou shalt return. 2SR, page 25. Hence, from the time Jesus was taken before the priest to the time he arose, there was exactly 3 days and 3 nights, fulfilling the words. For Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whole whale's belly, so shall the man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, that is, in the hands of sinful clay. One symbolic, number 6, page 7. Okay, so this new code's interpretation is not in harmony with the BTH published message. In the hands of sinners is not a good and safe place. Further, it was a time of the most abusive and suffering for our king. He certainly was not resting, either physically or spiritually, as this code says. So we see once again that Florence Hodoff, who has that non-prophetic mantle, just private person, tries to make us believe that this is one of Brother Hodoff's words, one of his sermons, when it's ridiculous, brother, because Brother Hodoff clearly published that it was in the hands of sinful clay. It wasn't good, resting, safe place. And even the logic of the Bible contradicts this new code. So we found this one, again, another troublesome code. All right, so we're going to stop here, and we wanted to bring you part 2. We're going to continue with volume 12, number 2, and we'll pick that up next time. But we hope that you're starting to see the picture here, that these new codes are just nothing more than a mixture of truth and error, and we can't tell you and can't be the conscience for you, but we do pray and hope that you'll review the full code, new code report here, and make a decision in the closet of prayer. And if the Spirit and truth is guiding us, we have one clear decision, brother, and that is that if you're going to say that this should be part of the golden bowl, you're going to have to say there was 5 pipes allowed in Zechariah 4. The Lord made a mistake. Instead of 2, he should have put 5. Why do we say that? Because you're allowing M.J. Bingham, Florence Hodoff, and Donna Dare to be a pipe, because that's who was involved with these new codes. Those 3 have taken those new codes and made doctrines out of them, made strange fire that some brethren still hold on to today. So pray about it, and I'm sure the Lord will guide us into all truth. Okay, until next time, may you continue to study and show yourself approved, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Amen.